So if you want to perform a new ritual for you that's a very ancient ritual and you don't have a talus, they are outside. I invite you to try it on for size if you'd like. We're going to begin soon. In our sanctuary as opposed to Zoom. Actually, they're with Rabbi Harper right now on Zoom. But if you're in the sanctuary, you can join us by placing, if you have a talus, the tradition is to stand while you're placing it on your shoulders. And there is a blessing. The words can be found on page 2 in the silver prayer book. And if you are choosing to wear a talit this evening, if you'll join with us in the middle of the page. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehitatef b'tzitzit. And before we're joined by our Zoom congregation, I just want to say something to everyone in the room. Raise your hand if this is the first time you're here in 2.5 years, because I see a lot of faces that I haven't seen in a long time. And I just want to say it is really good to see you back in this space. We have an important job, and that is to fill this large room with sound, which is what we've missed the most during these past 2.5 years. Zoom has brought us many gifts, but when it comes to congregational voice, it just couldn't do it. And there's something that congregational voice does to the soul. So let us fill this place up with sound. Yom Kippur leads to forgiveness. If Yom Kippur enables you to finally let go of something you should have let go a long time ago, then it is the beginning of healing. And Yom Kippur then can be the happiest day of the year. So my hope is that these next 24 hours are the happiest day of the year as we begin to let go and ask for forgiveness. So let us once again sing out loud, sing with a sense of joy that this is a day of cleaning. Raise your hand if after you've done a spring cleaning, you feel good. There's just something about decluttering. What's the woman who declutters?
Marie Kondo.
Marie Kondo. We're condoing. So here we go.
La 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 la.
So I received a great email that I'd love to share with you. It said, I'll be in the synagogue this year, Rabbi, because number one, the experience brings me closer to that which is greater than myself, which Jewish tradition calls God. Then list two, I'm coming to the synagogue because I'm able to see myself more clearly, warts and all, in the presence of the divine. 3, services provide me with the opportunity to be in solidarity with the Jewish people through time and space. 4, the lessons of the holidays force me to face my own mortality, guide me on a path that will help me make my life count. 5, I come because I'm uplifted by the music and the sermon. 6, the synagogue provides me with a sacred space for prayer and offers me words of prayer when I'm unable to shape them on my own. 7, the holidays provide me with guidance to set my life back on course where I may have strayed, and they provide me with strategies for living a more sacred life. 8, in the context of community, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable, and I'm buoyed in my efforts to become a better person. 9, I'm able to reaffirm my faith in God and the goodness of humankind. And 10, with all that I receive, I'm able to leave the synagogue and face the year ahead optimistically, joyfully, and humbly. And then he writes, which I found interesting, can you make sure that I or any individual walk away feeling that my motivations have been met? Well, that is my hope for all of us these high holy days. That is what brings us here, whether you schlepped to the synagogue or you were at home on Zoom. Let us experience the fullness of these holidays. 24 hours, we're given a gift. It's quite an extraordinary ancient gift we've received, which is just to stop and reflect and grow. And so let's use our time well as we welcome in this day of Yom Kippur. And to do so, I would like to invite our cantor and her mom, Nikki Zell, to come forward to light our holiday candles. And you can find the words on page 9. Words of Shehechianu, thanking God for enabling us to reach this day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Amen. begin our service formally on page 16 with a section of the service called Kol Nidre. And of course, we know this prayer became so popular among the Jewish people that they began to call the entire evening Kol Nidre. But it's named for this one specific prayer. And what's interesting is that in the modern period, it challenged the rabbis, and many wanted to remove the Kol Nidre prayer. Because after all, Kol Nidre means all of our vows will be annulled. And they were feared that it would lead to a sense of mistrust. You know, you make a vow a month ago, and then on Yom Kippur, you annul the vow. How can you be trusted? And so they said we should actually change this prayer. But the people spoke loud and clear. They said the melody of the Kol Nidre is so stirring and so able to bring up the themes of repentance for us that we ask that you continue to recite this prayer on Kol Nidre. And so tonight I'd like to provide you with another way to interpret the words Kol Nidre for the rational mind. What does it mean to annul all vows? And I'd like to suggest that we treat the concept of a vow as a pattern or a habit that's been wired within us. And when we say there is an annulment, well, the annulment is the rewiring that comes from an awareness of intentional living. And so the cantor sings Kol Nidre 3 times to remind us that we need to rewrite some of the patterns in our brain. And the reason why perhaps it's sung 3 times is because we need to rewire our brains in 3 ways: through thought, through word, and through deed. And by doing so, we greet a new year, saying that we're not victims of the old way of thinking, but we're creators of a new reality. So let's now turn to page 16 for the words Or Zarua La Tzadik.
I'd like to invite forward Sheila Fikowski to offer the first rendition of the 3 times we will hear Kol Nidre this evening. Thank you, Sheila, and thank you to Victor on the piano.
We return to page 16, and at this time I'd like to invite any former presidents of our congregation who are in the sanctuary to join us on the bema. And I know that we have former presidents that need to be at home coming in virtually, and so we've given a Torah scroll to former President Henry Kay, who will hold the scroll on Zoom. And as we receive the scrolls from the ark, let us all rise. And just to our technology team, I see that Henry is now spotlighted on Zoom. But let's go between Henry and the bema so that our Zoom congregation can see the cantor as well.
Kol Nidre Late, v'charamei, v'konamei, v'chinuyei, v'kinusei, u'shvut. Kol Nidre Late, v'charamei, v'konamei, v'chinuyei, v'kinusei, u'shvut.
20. Let's read together. All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all have gone astray in error. Moses prayed to God, as you have been faithful to this people ever since Egypt, please forgive their failings now, in keeping with your boundless love. And God responded, I forgive as you have asked. Page 22, the call to worship. Respond together. Baruch Adonai, Amen.
Please be seated. As we continue on page 27, let us read together. We pause in reverence before the gift of self. The vessel shatters, the divine spark shines through, and our solitary self becomes a link in Israel's golden chain. For what we are by sharing, and as we share, we move toward the light. We pause in reverence before the mystery of a presence, the near and far reality of God. Not union, but communion is our aim. And we approach the mystery with deeds. Words lead us to the edge of action, but it is deeds that bring us closer to the God of light. We pause in terror before the human deed, the cloud of annihilation, the concentrations for death, the cruelly casual way of each to each. But in the stillness of this hour, we find our way from darkness into light. May we find our light so precious that we cannot but share it with the other, that light may shine brighter than 1,000 suns, with the presence among us of the God of light. We turn to page 28 and join together.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai.
Let's all rise once again.
You may be seated as we join together in chanting Ve'ahavta on page 30. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
And so as we turn to the words of Mi Chamocha, I invite you to listen carefully to motifs, to themes, musical themes you might hear from our choir, which I might add, I'm very happy to have back with us after 3 years. So listen to those sounds of Kol Nidre in this setting of Mi Chamocha.
We join in the middle of page 40. On the top of page 46, let us read together as we rise for the tefillah. Have mercy upon me, O God, as befits your faithfulness. In keeping with your abundant compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly of my iniquity and purify me of my sin. For I recognize my transgressions. I am ever conscious of my sin.
שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips, and my mouth may declare your praise. Yananai,
Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah,
We continue with the words of the prayer book or the words of our own hearts. As you conclude your prayers, you may find a seat. When you're ready, we join together on page 81, the words of Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom im Roma, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Oseh Shalom im Roma. Shalom Aleinu, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, we ask for peace on earth, and we say Amen. Ve'imeru Amen. Ve'imeru Amen. We raise our voice as one, and we say
And so, it being Yom Kippur, we now turn to our public confession, the Vidui, on page 82. And let us read in English together. Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence. And when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed.
We have done wrong.
And so if you're able, please rise as we join together in this public confession of sin, recognizing that we all have pieces within us of which we repent, for which we repent. And so we continue with this ABC, Aleph, Bet, Gimel of sins. You'll notice each one begins with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, pointing within or beating our chests as we chant together. Ashanu, Baganu, Gazanu, Dibarnu Dovi, ay, 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 Hevinu, Page 86. For these sins, our God, we ask forgiveness. Let's join together in English. The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths. The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor. The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Page 88. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control. The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation. The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior. The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech. The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit. For all these failures of judgment and will, God of forgiveness, forgive us, pardon us, lead us to atonement. Page 98. We listen to the words of Shema Kolenu. Hear our call, Adonai, our God. Show us compassion. Accept our prayer with love and goodwill. Take us back, Adonai. Let us come back to you. Renew our days as in the past. Shema Kolenu is a fervent plea for God to listen.
Hashivenu Adonai Elecha, Hashivenu Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu, Tashlichenu. Al tashlichenu. Led zikna ki
Before we continue, I just want to thank Josh for offering that fervent plea on behalf of our congregation. If you haven't met Josh, he is actually he's an incredible music educator and heads our Families with Young Children program that is growing in leaps and bounds, and he's brought extraordinary talent and energy to our community. But it also just so happens that in the past year, he was certified as a cantor by the Jewish Theological Seminary. So it's very good to have Cantor Rosenberg as well leading our team. So we are just, it's an embarrassment of riches in so many ways, the musical nature of our congregation. So thank you. So let us now continue. Page 100. We continue this plea for forgiveness on Kol Nidre. And we'll read an English passage, and then we'll continue with the words Adonai, Adonai, O Rachum v'Chanun, biblical words spoken by Moses, pleading for forgiveness for the people Israel. And we recite these words 3 times. Let's read with Ryan on page 100.
God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai, you spoke words that guide our lives to this day, but our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice they had promised, we will do and obey, and yet stiff-necked they broke their word, adoring an idol of God. How wonderful is your compassion in the face of their rebellion, your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our hands. We too make of gold a god, and we too forsake your word. At Sinai, you revealed 13 attributes of mercy, and these aspects of your nature, your very essence, we now recall.
Asking for forgiveness a second time. Continuing to look within. Page 114.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Together, Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and on our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, let our hands overflow with your blessings.
Avinu Malkeinu, let our eyes behold the dawn of redemption.
Avinu Malkeinu, we pray, do not turn us away from you with nothing.
Avinu Malkeinu, welcome our prayer with love, accept it, and embrace it.
Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us as befits your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, act for your sake, if not for ours.
Avinu Malkeinu, you alone are our sovereign.
Avinu Malkeinu, let the gates of heaven be open to our prayer.
Avinu Malkeinu, hear our voice, treat us with tender compassion.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koreinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu,
Long ago, in a small shtetl where the famous rabbi, the Baal Shem Tov, lived, there also lived a family of Torah scholars. The parents expected that each of their children would continue the family tradition of studying Torah. While the first and second children followed right in their parents' footsteps, the third child, Shmuel, had a hard time. It was hard for him to sit and focus for long periods of time. It was difficult to learn his letters, and he didn't seem to engage with the lessons. Shmuel's parents and his teacher realized that this school setting was not the ideal place for him to learn and grow. So instead, Shmuel's parents asked the town shepherd if their son could be his new apprentice. And so, unlike his siblings and everyone else in his family, Shmuel did not go to school. Instead, he spent every day in the fields and the meadows learning how to be a shepherd. Shmuel thrived. He loved the animals, he loved the outdoors, he loved how connected the sheep were to each other and how connected he felt to them. And he loved learning how to play the flute, which the shepherd taught him. For when he played his flute among the flock, the sheep listened. They came near, and everyone felt part of a whole. Shmuel felt connected and important, except there were a few days of each year when he would feel out of place. You see, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were the days when Shmuel was expected to join his entire family in the synagogue. Shmuel would sit quietly, unable to speak the words or the prayers, unable to read because he had not learned in school. It was not that he didn't want to be there. Rather, he yearned to join in, but he didn't know how. One year on Yom Kippur, Shmuel sat with his family as usual, longing to participate, when he happened to look up at the Baal Shem Tov. Shmuel noticed that the Baal Shem Tov kept his gaze on him, as if to encourage him. Shmuel sat and wondered what he could do to add his voice to the prayers of the community that felt so foreign. His hand went to the flute in his pocket, and he was reminded of how connected he felt to his herd when he would play. So he pulled out that flute and began to play the beautiful melody that wove harmoniously with the prayers of the congregation. He played with all his heart, with all his soul, so happy to finally have found a way to participate. But the community stopped their praying, and a sound of shock and horror went through the room. Suddenly, people were shouting at Shmuel to stop, shouting at the Baal Shem Tov to make him stop. But instead, the Baal Shem Tov spoke up gently. Finally, our prayers will reach heaven as a full community, he said, for all of us are now included. Shmuel has joined us with his pure joy, his love, his devotion, and we need his voice in order for God to hear all of us. We pray in the Unatana Tokef prayer on these holy days. As a shepherd herds the flock, causing the sheep to pass beneath the staff, so does God count and record the souls of all living beings. Each of us is part of a flock, and in that sense, we are as indistinguishable as one sheep to another. But the truth is that we are not identical. God considers us not as a flock, but one by one. God has given each of us our individuality and recognizes each of us as unique. As we heard from Dr. Kleeman, who preached on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, each one of us is created B'Tselem Elohim, in God's image. Each one of us is holy and has a purpose on this earth. We are each a face of God, regarded in God's eyes. But sadly, we are not always held in that same regard by others or even ourselves. We can all remember a time when we felt excluded, unappreciated, or not valued. It hurt deeply. I'm sure we can also think of a time when we witnessed someone else feeling this way and wished we had done something to make them feel more included. In fact, it was a feeling just like this, expressed by a congregant, that inspired me to write this sermon. Before I tell you the story, I want to ask you a question. How many steps do you usually need to take in this building until you see something or someone who makes you feel welcome? How long does it take for you to feel welcome? Well, this was the question that I was asked. If you're asking me, I've never felt the need to question whether or not I am welcome here in this holy place. Yet there was a part of me that wanted to ask them, how many? How many steps for you? But then I realized that the number wasn't important. It was the fact that they felt that they had to count or even ask the question at all. Can you imagine feeling so out of place or worrying about feeling so out of place that you come up with a test to see how long it takes for something, or better yet, someone, to include you and help you feel known and valued? For the record, the answer was hundreds of steps. Over 300 steps to the back corner of our building for this individual to see an LGBTQ+ flag, an outright sign that they would be welcome and accepted here. We are just like those sheep who need to be regularly drawn underneath the shepherd's staff and counted. We must not forget that all human beings have a range of needs in order to survive. And according to psychologist Abraham Maslow, there are different levels of human need. At the first level, the most basic needs are those of food, water, clothing, and shelter. But all the other levels have to do with areas of the psyche and the spirit, safety and security, love, belonging, and esteem. For our soul and our well-being are in danger if we do not feel loved, included, and regarded. Yom Kippur is a time for reflection, for internal housekeeping, and a time for us to consider how we have treated others during this past year. It's a time for us to realize that our actions matter, and so do the ways that we consciously and unconsciously treat others. It is also the time for us to take responsibility and to vow to do better in the coming year. Even though we, as a Reformed Jewish congregation, have values that have become more and more welcoming over time, we still have work to do. Not just within these walls, but out in the world. Here's the thing about learning to be more inclusive. It isn't always easy. We have to be able to step outside of ourselves or outside of what we conceive and experience as the so-called norm. We have new words to learn, new things to think about. Embracing and accepting someone who is different from ourselves takes a great deal of empathy. This year, we've tried something new with our High Holy Day name tags, providing an option for you to express your gender pronouns she, her, he, him, or they, them. I often hear, and many of you have genuinely asked, why do we have to use pronouns? Isn't it obvious what pronouns I use? Or people have remarked that the use of pronouns must be a generational thing. Different types of gender identities and expressions have been discussed in our Jewish tradition for thousands of years. Magnificent Jewish texts such as the Mishnah, the Talmud, and Jewish law codes from the 1st through the 8th centuries record and affirm 6 different types of gender identities: male, female, and gender fluidity or change over time. In fact, we count over 1,600 citations of such gender differences in our ancient texts. Even in the very first chapter of the Torah, when God creates human beings, B'Tselem Elohim, just in one verse alone, God creates a spectrum of gender identity. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzelmo, B'Tselem Elohim bara oto, Zachar u'nekeva bara otam. And God created humankind, in God's image God created it. God created male and female, God created them. Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Lazar, a Talmudic sage of the 5th century, comments, at the time that God created the first human, Adam, God created it androgynous. Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachum clarifies, God created human beings with 2 sides. The rabbis further expound, God took a side from one human being to create the other. One who is androgynous, based on this ancient teaching, is a person who has both male and female physical sexual traits. And the current English term we use is intersex. So you see, to our ancient texts and rabbis, we in our many different forms are B'Tselem Elohim. But just like Shmuel's parents in the story, inclusion has to begin with stepping outside of ourselves to consider another person's perspective and needs, even if it doesn't accord with our own experience. What if the binary gender construct of she, her, or he, him does not fit someone's understanding of self? What if one feels neither, or their sense of gender changes? Assuming that there are only 2 options, or that our own choices should fit everyone, excludes so many people in our community. Still, we can take it a step further by not only being understanding, but also welcoming. If we introduce ourselves by sharing the pronouns that work for us, I'm Rabbi Sapphire and I use she, her pronouns, then we invite others to introduce themselves authentically too. And if someone isn't ready to share their pronouns, then we can at least acknowledge them. And therefore, we make it known that in this space, we have an intention and a practice of inclusion. If you've never had to worry about people using the wrong pronouns when referring to you, I know it may not seem important, but a small added effort can make a world of a difference to someone struggling to be seen as who they really are. We each have work to do when it comes to embracing any and all humans as B'Tselem Elohim. There are so many people in our lives who we can do a better job of welcoming and including. Is it our child who does not go to college or who chooses a gap year or a trade program? Is it a family member who is neurodiverse or differently abled? Is it the grandchild who expresses an identity fluid on the gender or sexuality spectrum? Or is it the neighbor who has migrated from another country? A community member who expresses a political opinion different than our own? A colleague who is a single parent? Or is it simply the person in the grocery store or at the gym or in the neighborhood that we always notice is alone? We can all learn to be better shepherds, like Shmuel, whose flute calls out his truth in his authentic voice. When I think of the flute as the instrument of inclusion, I cannot help but think of a talented, Grammy Award-winning musician and pop star who I admire. Yes, Lizzo. In addition to her music, her dance moves, and her stage presence, Lizzo, a large, beautiful Black woman who is not afraid to express herself in a leotard, is known for breaking barriers, advocating for and elevating the value of artists and people of all body types, all sizes and races. And Lizzo does it with a flute. For the sound and the message of a flute transcends the boundaries that we humans tend to set. Just a few days ago, Lizzo was invited by the Library of Congress to play a very special flute at a concert in DC. A flute that was made for James Madison in 1813. And here she was in 2022, freely expressing herself on stage, playing a flute that was made for a white slave owner. Even for most of us who are not famous or classically trained flutists like Lizzo, the sound of the flute is beautiful. It is accessible, small, and portable, and it can be taken anywhere. In fact, it fits inside the shepherd's pocket. While not everyone can play an actual flute, we can think of our own voices as metaphorical flutes. Think of the sweet, melodic sound of our voice when we sincerely ask someone, "What is your name?" Truly, how are you? Or when we invite them to tell us a bit about their story. This is as sweet as the music of a flute. Especially within our TBE community, we have the sacred mission to exercise these muscles of welcome and inclusion. In this new year, the Temple Board of Trustees has set a priority to welcome each congregant anew. We realize whether you are a new member or you are a long-term member, that the pandemic has created distance for all of us. To many of us, this community feels like a warm home, but we have work to do to open the door and to reach others who do not yet feel this way. And so we must shepherd. We look to the ultimate shepherd, God, for inspiration. For when we are feeling lonely or disconnected, we turn to the words of Psalm 23. May these words not only comfort us, but may we embody and enact them. Adonai ro'i lo echsar. God is my shepherd. I am not lacking. God brings me to greener pastures, to waters that are still and replenishing. Even though I walk and count my steps in a valley of darkness, I will not fear, because you are with me. Your rod and your staff bring me comfort. Your melody and your song draw me near. Because of you, my shepherd, only goodness and love will I know for the rest of my life, and I will dwell in this sacred, welcoming house forever. Gamar Chatima Tova.
Turn back in our prayer book now to page 116. If you're able, please rise for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוסף בראשית, שלא עשנו פגעי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורל ככל העולם, ואנחנו מודים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ביום ההוא יהיה
continue with the words of Mourner's Kaddish on page 122. And it is our custom at Temple Beth Elohim to invite the mourners in our midst to first rise, meaning if you have lost an immediate family member during the past 30 days, you've lost a parent during the past 11 months, or you are observing a yortzeit, the anniversary of the passing of a loved one, as I am, I invite you to please rise at this time. If you're on Zoom, we invite you to use the chat room to list the individuals you're remembering. And since there are not as many mourners as in our last service, let us, rabbis, if we can go around and take a section so that we don't forget anyone, and have them recite the names of those individuals, perhaps the relationship as well. Did we forget anyone? Then in support of the mourners in our midst in the sanctuary, if we can rise at home, reflecting, let me add my sister's name as well, Jill Sissenwein Berger, and let us recite these words together. Yitzkadal v'yitkadash shemer rabah, v'yalmad yivrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabah v'varach le'olam olamei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kdusha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, da'amiran b'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
A few announcements before we conclude together. Tomorrow morning we start at 8 a.m. with our morning service, or you can come to the late service as you did today at 10:45 a.m. There is a Families with Young Children service in the tent at 9:15, rain or shine. We have teen services, we have TGIHH, so please check the calendar, and then you can stay through the whole day. If you come to the late service, we have the hour of learning at 2 o'clock. Our spiritual autobiographies, our hour of response at 3 o'clock, and then Mincha and Yizkor beginning at 4:30. And we'll be concluding at around 6:30 with Havdalah. So we invite you to bring the kids back for Havdalah at around 6:20, and we'll conclude together with a break the fast. We also have Sukkot, obviously, coming up right after, our Feast of Tabernacles, and then Simchat Torah the week after.
Sunday, October 16th, 2 to 6 p.m., not to be missed, our first ever TBE Farmers Market, followed by a celebratory Simchat Torah festive concert featuring Jewish bluegrass band Nefesh Mountain. It's going to be amazing.
And we have a lot of new learning taking place in the building and on Zoom this year. We've benefited from an extraordinary capital campaign. I know Neil Silverstein will share a little tomorrow as our president, but a number of very large transformative gifts to really deepen our adult engagement at the temple. So we invite you to make this the year where you reconnect or deepen your connection to the temple. So we're going to conclude with Adon Olam, but before we go, I just want to share a reading, which is, people are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you've got anyway. For you see, in the final analysis, it's between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. And so may tomorrow be a day where we grow and we work towards becoming the people that God intended us to be. And we choose life, our best selves. Let's conclude. Adon Olam, page
126. I'm going to get it right this time.
Adon Olam, Hashem alav, v'terem kol, yitzir nivra, ein nasa, v'chefzo kol, azay melech, shemo nikra, ואחרי כיפות הכל לבדו, ימלוך נורא, והוא היה, והוא עובר, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם השם מלך בטרם כה יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה והוא יהיה בתפארה. אדון עולם השם מלך בטרם כה יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא הווה בתפארה.
prayer books on the seats for tomorrow. Good Yantaf. Have an easy fast.
Oh, amen.